Hello and welcome to the Inspired Leaders Book Club, which is brought to you by 3minuteleadership.com. I'm Christine Boston, your host for this discussion today, and I'm joined by Elina Teboul, author of Feminine Intelligence. Welcome, Elina.
Hi, everybody. So happy to be here with you, Christine. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. Really good to have you along with us tonight. So the first question, whereabouts are you in the world this evening?
I'm in London, which actually today I have to say the weather has been quite nice. I've been spending some time in the sunshine. Now it's looking a little gloomy by now, but in London, in Notting Hill.
Very nice. Yeah, I'm just outside Cardiff and the sky right now is looking a little bit grey, but that's okay because, you know, the weather's been really nice lately, hasn't it? So we can cope with some rain by now. And it's not a London accent or a British accent. Whereabouts are you from?
Oh yeah, someone recently told me that it's like a symphony of different sounds when I speak. So I was born in Russia, and I moved to the U.S. to New York when I was 6, and I think actually that experience is really influenced a lot of my beliefs in a lot of the parts of the book, because my parents kind of fled the communist regime in the middle of the night. So it's kind of a escape story. And I grew up in New York, and now I've lived in London for the last 5 years.
Well, we are happy to have you in Britain. But yeah, I'm sure that's a good mix of experiences and views that would, perhaps come together to kind of form the ideas that you've shared in this book. So reading your biography, I can see that you have advanced degrees in psychology and law from Columbia University. You then practiced as an attorney with a big law firm, and you taught law before moving into organisational psychology and leadership. So I'm really interested in your corporate experience and how that has shaped your view of leadership today.
Yeah, so it was my first job. I studied economics in undergrad at NYU, and then I went straight to Columbia for law school and went right into big law, practicing investment management. And at that point in my life, it never really occurred to me that work should be about purpose, or it should be about self-actualization. I had, as I just said, I was an immigrant, I had immigrant parents, and it was the very classic, you go to this kind of school, you get this kind of job, and it pays really well, and it's prestigious, and that's what work really should be, and that's what I was told. And so I was very excited for my job in a big prestigious law firm, but over the years, it just didn't fulfill me. And I looked around and I saw that it wasn't really fulfilling my colleagues either. And I'd like to say that I made this big decision to leave, but it was actually, an incredible opportunity that just happened. And I tell the story of Alan Gray in the book, and it was really an honor to tell his story, because he's kind of like the billionaire you never heard of. So we all love to read the big biographies of Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and all of these kinds of people. And Alan was this kind of person, but extremely private and secretive. And so there's really nothing written about him. So it was such a pleasure to kind of share with the world. But Alan, he created the largest investment firm out of South Africa. And now it's in, I think, 11 countries with like 100 billion under management. And he decided to give his entire fortune away to philanthropy. So when I met Alan and he decided he wanted to create a family foundation, he basically said, you're going to take a pay cut. You're going to, move to the Bermuda Triangle, which is, so you said I have a lot of accents and experiences. One of them also includes living in Bermuda, of all places. and you're going to help the family create this foundation. So I left the law firm, and I left kind of corporate life in order to help Alan and the Gray family fulfill this philanthropic mission that they had. And it was, I call it in the book, my kind of intellectual awakening. When we get to the end of this conversation, I'll tell you about my kind of spiritual, emotional awakening. But that was more the first time that the light bulb went on, and I realized that work could be so much more than the paycheck or the prestige or like the things that I was chasing when I started in corporate practice. And it's just amazing to me that I was able to go through like university and law school and like never even question that that's the purpose of work. And now with my leadership advisory practice, I work with so many incredible people. Some of them are kind of inclined to look for that purpose in their lives, and others are more maybe chasing the corporate ladder. And I'm sure there's people listening to this call that are in either of those camps or somewhere in the middle. And it's always I encourage people who are listening to this to look at their own lives and their own kind of personal narrative and the story of their work and say, like, what were those pivotal moments for me where I just completely changed my understanding of like myself and my relationship to my work, because that's really important to understand for our identities.
And connecting to your purpose is so important, isn't it? You do quote Dan Pink in that, don't you? And yeah, of course, his theory on motivation is around autonomy, mastery, purpose. That purpose is so key. So it sounds like a real calling for you. Did you go from, like, was that a kind of midpoint on your way to organizational psychology? Like, how did that journey come about?
Yeah, so what's really interesting, again, about Alan, who influenced me so much, is when he talked about philanthropy, he called it active strategic philanthropy. So we didn't write checks to various charities. What we did was a very, very long-term, big, meaningful project. So he wanted to tackle the unemployment problems in South Africa, and he believed the way to do that would be to support social entrepreneurs, those people who are on the ground, who knew their country best and who wanted it to thrive. And so the Alan Gray Foundation created an incredible accelerator program. Now it takes children as young as 15 and puts them, through different courses, teaching them to have an entrepreneurial mindset. Like, what does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to be a social entrepreneur? Someone who's really thinking about how what they create is going to have positive impact. Alan also created several leadership institutes at various universities, also teaching about purposeful and meaningful leadership. And so even though I thought I was going into philanthropy, I was really going into much more learning about leadership and social leadership. So I decided to leave and go back to Columbia and do my master's in psychology so that I could really try to understand, what makes a person, an individual person, decide to be this kind of leader and to dedicate themselves. And then also on an organizational level, right? Like how can we have organizations that thrive, whether, the way that they support the larger society and ecosystem and all the people within them.
Mm-hmm. And you're now using your knowledge and skills for environmental and social impact.
Yeah.
You're currently on the board of the Earth Law Centre, and you've written this book. So I can see your copy behind you. Here's mine. Thank you for writing this book, bringing this to the world. This has been a real gift, and I have very much enjoyed reading it. You say that this book is a powerful call to action for leaders ready to reshape business with purpose and heart. I would say it would be easy to think that this is a book that you wrote for women. Is that what you had in mind, or were you thinking a broader audience when you kind of, started writing?
Yes, we are going to welcome all of the men listeners into the room here, that this is not a book for women. And I thought about the title like the entire 2 years of writing it, the entire year of the publication process, and way up until the moment where I basically couldn't go back, because I understood that from the title, people would think it's a book for women. But as a psychologist, I really borrow from the Carl Jung tradition. And for people who don't know, it's Carl Jung, one of the kind of fathers of modern day psychology. He talked a lot about the individuation process, which is what we now really think about, sort of self-actualization. People probably know Maslow's hierarchy. So it's, when you get to that tipping point of really being the best version of yourself. And he talked about this balance of the feminine and masculine, and how all of us, regardless of our gender, need to be able to be comfortable with the feminine energy, the values, the principles, as well as the masculine. And so this is a gender agnostic book. What's really interesting for me, because while I share a lot of my experiences in this book, really it was born from my advisory practice and from speaking to all of my clients and really understanding what are the issues that they're facing in their own life, whether it's personal issues. So there's a lot about, doing the inner work and finding your own purpose, finding your authentic voice, finding congruence, so that you could be that kind of leader who has the courage to stand up for the things that are important to society at large. But it always starts with the person in front of me as a coach. And for all the listeners, it's really about, like, what is it for you? How can you be the best version of yourself? How can you find your authentic voice? And so that you could really shine that light onto the world that each and every person is really meant to do. And I understood that that was so deeply connected to this idea of the feminine, because in particular for women, we shy away from leaning into those aspects of ourselves because society calls them at best soft skills, at worst weaknesses. And over generations, we have been told that in order to be taken seriously, in order to succeed in business and in life, that we really need to lean into our masculine. So the feminine is often associated with emotionality, with intuition, with interconnectedness, with a softness, the kind of yin to the yin and yang. And the masculine is often associated again with that yang energy, which is about doing and achieving and being rational and linear and right and achievement. And those are the qualities that we measure ourselves by, our self-worth by very often, which creates a lot of unhappiness for people. That's also how we measure success in organizations and the basis of which we get promoted and seen in our workplace. And so this was really a call to reconnect with our feminine energy. And this is true for male leaders as well. Now, what's so interesting is when I was conducting all my interviews, and whether it was with my clients or with other people, most of the men actually got it right away. And they would say, I want to tap into this part of myself. I really love this kind of leadership, because they weren't afraid of it. They haven't had decades of, conditioning against it. But it was the most senior women, the women that I respected so much, the women who were powerhouses, that would get really nervous, and they would say, well, what exactly are you proposing here? And I understood that fear, because feminism has done a lot for women, but it's also created a lot of negative narratives for women, which is actually quite anti-feminine, which I think is a shame, and that it's gone in that direction. And so I got a lot of pushback from it, like emotional pushback. And I thought, well, I have to call this book Feminine Intelligence, because I have to kind of go into the defense of the feminine. And even if there's a misconception around the title, if people think it's just about being, a woman in business, and I think it's so much more. It's a kind of psychological, philosophical exploration of the self and the self within society. I thought, if it elicits such an emotional response, I really have to dig into it.
I agree with that. And like the kind of encouraging the feminine energy. So you find then that the men that you work with are more willing to lean into that than the women. I guess it's true that, like, we're so conditioned, there are so many negatives, and women have to walk such a fine line as leaders, it can't be too much this, can't be too much that, or be perceived negatively. So that's interesting if, that's kind of
And I'm
coming through.
sure every single woman who is watching this, who's listening to this, has felt it at some point, right? In your life, you have felt that, oh, I'm too emotional. I care too much. My male colleagues are speaking over me. And if I think that I should advocate for something other than what they believe is going to push the bottom line, then I'll be ostracized and I won't get that promotion. And it's just these narratives and these constant pressures on women to try to be something that they're not. And and I think that men are praised in today's world for exhibiting those same values. So when we see a male leader being emotional and caring and supportive and relational, we praise that leader. And that's for a lot of women,
Yeah,
that's even more angry, because it's like, well, he can do that, but if I do that, then I'm put in a different box. And I'm
yeah,
hopeful that as men can more and more lean into those aspects of themselves and model good behavior, then women will feel like they have permission to
yeah.
also in the workplace exhibit those kind of behaviors, because um, they will be rewarded for that.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, I really think if we had more women in positions of power, or more feminine energy in those
Yeah.
positions of power, then there would be less conflict in the world, because there'd be more collaboration, more maybe listening, compassion, empathy, and we'll be able to get to solutions that are actually good for people.
Yes, I mean, I will say too that this book is not about advocating for the feminine being in any way better than the masculine.
Yeah,
It's about the balance. So, one metaphor that I use quite often and that I really love is that if you imagine a bird, and that bird represents all of us, it represents the bird of humanity. And for decades, it's been flying with just one wing. So this is the masculine wing, and this wing has become overdeveloped and overused. And so the bird, it can't really take flight. It's stuck in the same flight path. It's repeating the same mistakes. This is our society. We keep coming back to certain toxic behaviors over and over again. And so the dream is that the feminine wing of the bird of humanity will finally fully extend so that they could find balance. And then the bird could really soar. So again, I don't want people to walk away with, well, if I'm a woman, I shouldn't be rational, I shouldn't get things done, I shouldn't negotiate, I shouldn't stand up for myself, I shouldn't be strong. None of that is true. You should be all of those things. And people who know me well actually kind of would laugh about the book, because they're like, well, you have so much masculine energy, because I was a corporate lawyer in New York. So of course I have so much masculine energy. I love to be in my masculine, and I actually find it quite difficult to accept being in my feminine. And it's taken me a really long time to understand that there's so much power in being able to tap into that energy when I know that is going to serve me. And so this is all about, for anyone reading this book, for them to be able to be in their full power, to be able to say, right now, this is going to serve me and I can use this, or vice versa, right? Because very often we are very reactional. So again, like, I'm a coach, so I work with people a lot on their like live issues in their business, in their personal life, and they have like a stimulus that happens, and very often they come back and they say, well, I did this and I screamed at this person and I made this happen. It's like, well, you could have given it time. You could have had the coaching session first, and we could have had time to just reflect and breathe and think and be strategic and maybe be soft and maybe be curious, because so often we just make assumptions and we start to battle without giving an opportunity to just say, I wonder what's happening for that person. I wonder what they really mean. How could I check? How could I be with stillness with myself and just sit and try to understand, like, what's coming up for me and why is it coming up for me? Is it tied to something really old that's not even part of the current situation? Is it my mother's voice? Is it my father's voice that's in the room with me in this negotiation? Is it, the voice of culture? And I haven't even taken the time to dissect all of these different voices in my head to find my true authentic voice, because I don't give myself enough time to just be in stillness. And so this is really where feminine intelligence comes alive. It's in that practice of giving yourself permission to find the stillness, to be curious, to understand yourself as instrument, to have that self-mastery and not have ego. Because in many situations, we are consumed by the masculine ego, this necessity to be right. And we might not even really mean the kind of things that we're pushing for, but we think that they'll, give us rewards and give us recognition and people will like us for them. But to have the courage to step back and say, I don't need that. That's not me. Let me get curious. Let me get quiet. Let me listen. And so all of those kind of tools, techniques for self-awareness and self-mastery is also a really big part of the book and what I hope to give to people.
Yeah, and it is a very spiritual book. You really, pull out the importance of that and kind of like tapping into your heart and your mind and your soul and bringing those three things together. And I'd say it's the kind of like emotional and spiritual foundation that isn't often encouraged in anyone, let alone, as a really important part of leadership. Like, why do you think it's so important for leaders today to be able to really like dig deep into that?
If anyone thinks about what am I going to regret when I'm on my deathbed, when I look back, or what am I going to be proud of that I've accomplished? And when you look back, are you really going to think, oh, I'm so glad that I stuck it to so-and-so. And, I went to all those meetings and I did all of those things. Like, what's the bigger purpose of all of the things that we do? And I don't know, I'm a big fan, and my kids are big fans of like science movies and sci-fi. And whenever I see the Earth in any of these movies, like, the whole Earth, and it doesn't have boundaries with countries, and you can't even see the people, and you just think like, what am I wasting my time on? All of these like petty, insignificant things that consume our daily lives they're so small. And it liberates you, really gives you this freedom to say, well, how do I want to live my life? How do I want to contribute? What is going to, make me feel like I've left a legacy that's actually important? And I think that like this opportunity to zoom out is very seldom given to us, because the corporate machine wants to suck everything out of you. And that just means that we are wearing blinders and we're so busy like little hamsters going so fast towards the next thing that we never stop and ask, like, but should I even be doing that? And now with, ChatGPT and AI, everything is even faster, even more possible. And so I think that ChatGPT can do all the left brain tasks, a lot of the masculine competencies that we were prizing ourselves on. Like, that's why ChatGPT is replacing a lot of people's jobs. But maybe this is an opportunity to say, but what can't AI do? And what is this opportunity for me to get in touch with my own humanity, which is actually future-proofing my career and future-proofing my skills, because that can't be replaced by AI. Like, as a psychologist, as a coach, people often ask me, like, do you think that people will just use ChatGPT as, they can talk about their problems and their feelings and ChatGPT can give them a response? I'm like, yeah, but sometimes I just have to sit with someone and like look them in the eyes for 5 minutes and not say anything. And then they'll cry and they'll say, you're right. I'll say, but I didn't say anything. But they'll say, but I know what you were thinking. And I didn't have to say anything. And they can't, and ChatGPT can't do that because ChatGPT won't know them on a soul level. And it won't give them that permission to be seen. It won't put up the mirror. And I think this is true of so many professions. If I go back to when I was practicing law, you have clients. We all have clients, right? And what is that? How do we bring people together? How do we collaborate? How do we make people feel seen and heard so that they want to, so that they're inspired to contribute to the cause? And I think that, this is really where the future is going, given that we have technology to do most of our other tasks now.
Yeah, and the humanity is so easily lost in the tasks, in the doing the stuff.
Yeah.
You can really forget. And then, yeah, I definitely recognize, that it's very easy not to be in tune with your spirituality and your kind of like, well, even your purpose, your like your deepest beliefs, and in the kind of busyness of this
Mhm.
world, to really stop and like clear your thoughts properly, like really think for a minute, like who am I and what is my how should I respond, like as my
Yeah,
authentic self, what is the right way for me to be doing this.
absolutely.
um so one of the things I was kind of surprised about when I kind of started the book was that you really ground your ideas in economics, opening with the idea that capitalism could deliver a world where everyone thrives. But of course, the reality is that it has led to social inequality, which is increasing, and environmental degradation, which is increasing. But where do you think capitalism went off track? And is
Yeah.
it possible to get it back on track? And like, what kind of leadership do we need for that?
Yeah, and I'm really inspired by the work of Conscious Capitalism by Raj Sisodia, who actually wrote the foreword to the book. So he is like a lot of people have heard that term, but maybe don't realize that it was coined by Raj as well as the founder of Whole Foods, and that they wrote this book together called Conscious Capitalism, and that's where that buzzword that we all use now actually comes from. And John Mackey, who's the founder of Whole Foods, and Raj, they really lay out this beautiful vision for businesses that contribute to society instead of being extractive and remove things from society. And Whole Foods was a beautiful example of that, of an organization that really thought about its suppliers, its customers, wanting to serve healthy food so that people feel better as opposed to the rest of the food industry, which, is quite questionable. And it gave an example, a real life example to say, well, an organization can make money, it can have profit, but it can also not put profits at the center of the economic universe. And they, two men, dared to say that why don't we put love at the center of our corporate universe? And I thought that was so powerful. And so Raj's work has really inspired me. And again, my family moved from the Soviet Union. It was communism. And I grew up with parents who said, that doesn't work. That makes people flee in the middle of the night. That makes entire countries collapse. That makes, we all know, a lot of serious political and social problems. And so I just never subscribed to that camp. I always will say, I'm a capitalist. And Alan, who I worked for, he always would say, well, I'm a capitalist. And that's why we're funding social entrepreneurs, because they're the ones who are going to be most inspired to create for themselves a financial future, as well as do things for their country. And I think that it's really naive and against human nature to try to say that there's something wrong with profits, or that where we shouldn't think about our financial futures. I just don't see how that's true. And so I think both can be true. Like, there is a paradox, but it can be true that we can create organizations where we are thinking about profits that are the lifeblood of businesses, because we are going to pay people fairly, and we're going to pay our suppliers fairly, and people don't need to be worried about where their paycheck comes from and be in poverty. We can have these organizations that are creating wealth for the world, but they can also do so consciously. And I think that in the book, I try to share many examples of companies like Whole Foods that have succeeded in that.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I also want to touch on the work that you refer to in the book of John Gersma, who found, you kind of highlight in there, found through his research that the most important leadership traits are the ones we consider to be feminine. And I really like this. He said that femininity is the operating system of 21st century progress. But we kind of touched on this already. It can be so difficult for women leaders because they just have to walk such a fine line.
Yeah.
And another thing you say in there, which kind of I wrote down because it it resonated with me so much. Women have closed themselves off from their authentic power and unique gifts and their alignment with and trust in themselves. And I wanted to ask you, like, what do you think women need to hear to allow them to really take hold of their power?
Yeah, I think it's probably examples of successful women who are being able to be themselves and also create success in their businesses. So, for example, just this week, I was watching the masterclass of Sarah Blakely, who created Spanx, and she was the first self-made female billionaire. And she created, for people who don't know what Spanx are, it's basically this undergarments that helps women wear, like she calls it, white pants. And women need this. Like it's a really important invention that she did, and people made fun of her and they said, like, what are you doing, when she was cutting the socks off of underpants of stockings to create these. And she said, but women, like, we all know this, when we are in our clothing, there's a certain level of confidence and nothing is tight and nothing is hurting us, and we're able to stand tall, stand in our truth, feel good about ourselves. This is important. She wanted to give that to women, this sense of confidence, not having to worry about that, like, what do my, like, are my white trousers see through? And this is a real concern for women, and she understood that and she empathized with women. And so she became, I think, the first self-made female billionaire from launching this company. And I loved this. In her masterclass, she talked about the feminine and the masculine, and she used the same language. She used that. She's like, I'm a very feminine leader. I believe in empathy, in understanding my team and understanding what do my clients need, having this deep care and this deep desire to create something for women that is going to make them the best versions of themselves, that's going to give them that confidence. And when all of the men in the room told her that, you're wrong about this and you're wrong about that, somehow she found that inner confidence and inner power to just stick to her truth. When she brought this design to all of these different manufacturers, everybody laughed her out of the room. They said, I'm not making this and I'm not making this. And they were all men. And so she thought, why are all the men making all women's undergarments? And of course, they don't have to spend all day in them. So they're not thinking about the level of comfort. And that allowed for her to be super successful. And I think when we hear these women who are exceptionally successful, and they're able to use this language and to say that I want to be a feminine leader, I want to lead with caring, I want to lead with heart, I want to think about what my customer really wants, then for me, that I think gives permission to the rest of us to say, wow, if Sarah Blakely can do it, I can do it too.
Wonderful words like love, deep care. That's kind of where the place I want to be leading from, certainly. So, okay, before, we're kind of coming to the end, but I've got to ask you, because I wasn't expecting a chapter on psychedelics, but that was really interesting. So, like, why did you choose to include that? Why are you so passionate about it?
Yeah, so when I mentioned Alan and I said that was my intellectual awakening, and then we had this beautiful conversation of, how hard it is to tap into that more spiritual aspect of ourselves, especially I didn't grow up religious, and so I didn't have that aspect. And I was always looking for some spirituality, something to connect to, and I couldn't find it. And then I had an experience with a psychedelic assisted therapist. So when I write about psychedelics, I write about the specific use where you are working intentionally with a guide, with a therapist, which includes a deep amount of preparation, which for some people could be 24 hours, but it could be weeks and months of preparation, so that you really get very clear on what you want out of this experience. And then the experience itself is guided, so you're not just by yourself at the nightclub. That's not what we're talking about. And then you have an integration period where you think about, wow, I just experienced fear, God, love. I mean, all of the different things that could possibly happen in your psychedelic journey. But then you integrate it back into your life, and you ask, what does this mean for me? What could I really do? And so when I write about psychedelic leadership, what I advocate for is this kind of inner work. And it's really work because you're talking about deep traumas that come up. You are doing radical self inquiry. And you can have 10 years of therapy that won't get you to this level of self awareness that a guided psychedelic experience can have, because so many aspects of ourselves are in our subconscious minds and they're not in our conscious awareness. So we can talk all day long, like every day for the next 10 hours, and they just won't come out. And I think I quote a lot of business leaders in the book who attribute their psychedelic experiences for their innovations because of neuroplasticity. When you take a psychedelic, then it rewires your brain, and so you're able to have extremely creative ideas. Um, Leaders who talk about like resilience and self-awareness, because again, this kind of radical self-inquiry allows you to tap into those parts of yourself, and also connection to nature. So especially plant medicines, there's a lot of research out of many universities now that show that experiences with plant medicines connect you to nature. Of course, the feminine, Mother Earth, is so when we're connected to the feminine, we're connected to nature. And actually, I share a deeply beautiful experience that I had in the book, where I had a plant medicine experience that made me realize that I really need to do more and give back in some way to the earth. And thank God for my guide who held me accountable. And we took that experience, which was beautiful and magical. And I really like understood that we are part of nature and not separate from it. And I felt her, our mother, and I wept. And it no longer was this check the box of like, I should recycle or I should do this, but it was this deep spiritual understanding of myself as nature and as part of our ecosystem. And that was why I decided to join the board of the Earth Law Center, because that was after my integration. I realized, well, if I like genuinely truly want to do something, how can I do that that's authentic to me? And I found a way. And so I really think that this is the next frontier for therapy, for coaching, for self-awareness. I'm always really excited when I hear about legalization. So unfortunately, in the UK, these experiences are still illegal, but there are other places that people can go, such as the Netherlands, Jamaica, various states in the US, where you can have these kinds of experiences legally. And I think that that's a really beautiful way to connect to your truth, connect to spirituality, connect to feminine intelligence, and find that sort of inner peace and inner truth that we're all always searching for.
Yeah, and that's a brilliant point to be kind of bringing this to a close. But yeah, the importance of doing the inner work, really understanding like who you are, why you're here, yeah, and take the time to really dig deep. I think that's, what's come through and made me feel really excited from this book. So I just want to ask you one final question then before I finish. And that is, if you were to share one leadership lesson from this book, what would it be?
Oh, yeah, beautiful question. I think it just starts with self, and it starts with making an intention today to make progress. So sometimes when we read these books and the goals sound very lofty or unattainable or bigger than we can handle, and if you decide that there is something that you want, and be really honest with yourself, because sometimes we can't even write down on a piece of paper what we truly, really want. Like, what is that authentic you calling for that you're embarrassed that you would want to write on a piece of paper and almost no one can see? And for women, we don't want to talk about big ambitions because somehow the society judges us for that. Like, what is it that you truly, really want? And put it on a piece of paper. And just do something small every day to remind yourself of what that is. It could just be a visualization. And I shouldn't say just, because visualizations are really important. Like, visualize yourself getting that think of one thing, one person you can talk to next week that can bring you closer to your dream. Like, think of all the small, tiny little steps that you can start to do to live in alignment with what you want to manifest. And sometimes these words, manifest, sometimes people think it's silly, but we are the architects of our reality. We can create it if we are intentional and purposeful. And that's really the takeaway, is that the world, that I don't think that I write about a naive, impossible world where people are authentic and happy and fulfilled, and we have societies and organizations that are thriving. I think this is all possible, and we just all have to start taking little steps to get there.
Yeah, thank you. And it's worth mentioning, you did touch on it before, but there were reflection questions
Yes.
at the end of each chapter of the book, and that really helps, I think, to be able to just go a bit inside yourself and sort of think about like what's important to you, and like what do you want to be and what can you be bringing to the world, and how can you build more of that. So thank you so much for this. Where can people buy it? Is it available in, all the main
All
bookstores?
the Yeah, Amazon, barnesandnobles.com, like all of the online retailers, anywhere you buy your books.
Brilliant. And if anybody listening wants to find out more about you, get in touch, have a look at kind of what you're working on, what's the best channel for that?
Yes, so I'm on LinkedIn, just my name, Elina Teboul. I'm on Instagram, Elina Teboul. And also I have my personal website where you can send me a note, and just elinateboul.com. It's all very easy. And you can send me a message there as well.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And I will just say that if anybody wants to find out more about 3minuteleadership.com or access resources and support, then you can visit the website or get in touch with us that way. But yeah, for now, Elina, thank you so much for giving up your time. This has been a really joyful exploration of feminine intelligence. I have very much enjoyed our conversation, and really appreciate you being with us tonight.